KoitCast.
Hi Peter, welcome to KoitCast.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
No worries, you come highly recommended from Pamela Nance, and who am I to refuse that recommendation? So here you are, thank you.
Yeah, I love Pamela. She's great.
Excellent, yeah, she very much is. Can you give a grounding to the audience, the listeners, the watchers of who you are, where you're from, etc., as much or as little as you want to give?
Yeah, so I'm Peter Alessandria. I'm based in New Jersey in the U.S. I have a long trajectory that included being an entertainment attorney in Hollywood for many years. Spent the last 15 years doing photography, professional photography for a living. And now I'm a filmmaker, and I'm producing a documentary that we're going to talk about today called Every Soul Knows, The Joy of Remembering Who You Really Are, Who We Really Are. And it's been a life-changing experience for me. And so I'm kind of been on a spiritual, I'm kind of a spiritual seeker. For the last 35 years, I've been on a quest to understand the answers to the bigger questions in life. And yeah, and that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Super ace. That quest of yours, by the way, exactly mirrors my quest, which is the reason why I do this sort of thing. Because I want those answers to the big questions. So.
No.
Yeah, fair
Good.
play. What was your introduction, if you will, to the paranormal world? Has anything happened in your life?
So here's the thing, Paul. I'm not an experiencer. I'm a seeker. And literally for the last 35 years, I've been on this journey, informally, but on this journey of exploring spiritual topics, paranormal, metaphysical, um, recently getting into the whole idea of extraterrestrial, extra dimensional beings, kind of
Nice.
gone down that rabbit hole. And I feel like it all kind of fits together somehow, although I'm not exactly sure right now. But my film is basically about the near-death experience and what people have learned from their experiences, and it's been for me, it's been more kind of the spiritual, metaphysical side of things to understand. I mean, basically, I feel like the thing I want to get across to my audience with my film is, we have no idea who we really are, and we have no idea what's really going on here. It's another way of saying you're not who you think you are. And by the way, what you think is going on here is not really what's going on here. And so I do believe there's all different dimensions, all different levels of awareness, of frequency of energy, and that we have the ability to travel between those dimensions. I think that's what the near-death experience is. People leaving this plane, the physical plane, the 3D reality, and when they shed their body, they're vibrating at a higher rate and they're moving to a higher dimension, to a higher frequency. And I don't think that's just for special people. I think we all have the ability to do that, to make that trip. And in fact, we do. My basic hypothesis is there is no death. We are eternal spiritual beings, just traveling up and down these frequencies, having all these wonderful adventures. And I mean, I'm very open now to people's having interviewed 62 near-death experiencers, psychics, channels, and mediums. I'm very open to people when they tell me, I had this experience, I had that experience. Um, in the past, I was not so open to all of that, but recently, certainly in the last 10 years or so, I've become more open-minded. And I tend to believe a lot of people when they tell me their story and just kind of take that in, as part of the filling in the pieces in the puzzle.
So for the last decade or so, you had this overriding interest in the phenomenon, like I do, seeker of knowledge. So, and then for the last decade, you've decided, right, I really want to dive in. What was the genesis of the project for you? What kicked it off for you to say, right, I'm going to do a film now?
So this documentary has just kind of been it's just kind of come together. Um, as I said, I mean, I'm familiar with the near-death experience. It was more for me. I mean, my journey into spirituality was more just to relieve some of the suffering in my life, to
Okay.
better understand myself, to better understand people, to better understand relationships, and to have a happier life. And that has progressed again to this idea of in terms of spirituality, who are we? This is the main question that I'm seeking to answer for myself and maybe help other people with that. Who are we really? And so the specific genesis for this project started, I'll go back to 2019 and I'll say there were three things that happened in 2019. So the first thing is I was working as a photographer. I was actually in California doing a photo shoot for a client. And then I was going to head up to Northern California to do some photography. I have a fine art photography business to do some photography for that in Yosemite at the national park there. It's very beautiful, nice landscapes and all that. And I injured myself.
Oh no.
And I didn't even I was on the way to the park and I got out of my car. I was looking for a restroom and I tripped. There was a curb. I didn't fall, but somehow I tore my calf muscle and I was immediately out of commission. I couldn't walk. I couldn't put any weight on my right foot. And but in that moment, Paul, I heard now I have to backtrack a little bit. So in 2008, I lost my law practice in the global financial crisis. So I literally, in a matter of months, I went from a really nice six-figure lifestyle to nothing. And I spent a few months trying to resurrect my law practice and find new clients and all that, and nothing was happening. And eventually I made the decision that maybe this was an opportunity for me to change careers. I had been informally studying photography and filmmaking. I actually became an amateur filmmaker for a while. And when the 2008 global financial crisis hit, I looked at that as an opportunity to do what I really loved, right? Which was the creative filmmaking, photography, and all of that. And while I appreciated being a lawyer, it was never really my passion in life.
Yeah.
So I make this transition and I jump into this new career. And I also decided to move back to the East Coast. I was living in Los Angeles, but I'm from the East Coast. My family's here. So I came back, and for almost 3 years, nothing happened. And at first I thought, well, it must be the economy because the economy was still pretty rough, right? And then I thought, well, maybe it's not the economy. Maybe it's because I went to law school. I went to business school. I have an economics degree. I never even took like an art appreciation class in college. I never studied photography. So I thought, well, maybe that's it. I don't have a formal education in filmmaking or photography. And then I met some other photographers who they didn't have an education in photography, but they were doing well. I thought, well, maybe that's not it. At one point, I even thought it was because I didn't have the latest and greatest camera equipment. What I realized eventually was the problem wasn't out there, the problem was in here.
Bang
And
on.
that was I had this really negative self-image when it came to being a creative person. As a lawyer, I could at least say, well, I have the degree and I went to school and all, but with the photography, it was just my passion. It was just something I loved doing. But I lacked the confidence to put myself out there as a creative professional. So I was kind of hiding out from life. And what happened was after almost 3 years, the money started to run out. And it was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it, right? And I had to start doing all the things that anybody needs to do if they want to have a successful business. Things like marketing, and putting myself out there as a creative person. So I started to do that. And as I said earlier, over the years, I've been studying things like law of attraction, the metaphysical principle of manifestation. I was playing around with affirmations. I had a vision board, right? Had all these tools that would help me manifest what I wanted in my life, but I wasn't using them. Instead, I was hiding out because, again, as I said earlier, I was terrified of criticism. I was terrified of rejection. I was terrified of what if they don't like me, that whole thing. And when the money ran out, now I had to push through all of that. And I started to apply all these things that I've been studying. So I started using affirmations. I came up with a very clear vision for what I wanted to achieve with my business. So I started applying all these things that I had been studying, and I started pushing through the fear. And I also started doing basic stuff like cold calling. I started calling all the local businesses in my area to see if they needed any photography work. Long story short, within a couple of years, Paul, I went from somebody who never won an award for anything in my life to somebody who's won more than 75 awards for my photography, for my creative work. I went from somebody who was afraid to post photos on social media to somebody whose work has been published in newspapers and magazines around the world. Like millions of people have seen my work. And I went from somebody who never thought I could really have a career as a creative professional to somebody who, I have collectors of my photography work people as far away as Australia. So I went from this complete transformation, right, of somebody who couldn't get off the couch because I was afraid to put myself out there to now I'm winning awards, I'm having exhibitions, my work is published around the world, as I said. I'm traveling the world now doing photography and all of that. And so people started to say, well, you really need to write a book. And I'm thinking, yeah, one day I'm going to write a book about, how I transform my life, my career. And so now it's 2019. I'm in Los Angeles. I head up to Northern California to do some fine art photography, and I injure myself and I'm out of commission. Now, I don't know if you've ever torn a muscle
Many
or a
times.
calf muscle in particular, but it is like the most excruciating thing you can imagine. And it was so painful, and it was just at one minute I was fine, the next minute I couldn't walk. And remember, I didn't even fall, but somehow I just caught my leg in the right way that I tore my muscle. But what I heard in that moment in my head was, now you can write your book.
There you go.
Now, writing a book was the last thing on my mind in that moment, but I had been thinking about it over the years. What would I say? How would I want to say it? And I had this feeling like that was part of my mission in this lifetime was to write this book, right? But I wasn't doing anything to move that forward. So now I have this injury, and guess what? I'm out of commission for 9 months. But I knew in that moment, when I heard that voice in my head, I knew that's what I needed to do, was write that book. And so this is the book we're talking about. It's called Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, Overcoming Our Self-Imposed Limits to Have the Life We Want. And I started writing it that night in the hotel in Yosemite, California, and I didn't stop until it was finished almost 9 months later. So that's the first thing that happened in 2019. The second thing that happened was my dad passed. And he had been ill for a long time. It was, it was still very sad. It was the biggest loss that I had had in my life up to that moment. But it reignited this quest, this desire, what happens after we die? What's going on here? Who are we? This can't be all that there is, right? And so dealing with that loss was another thing that happened. And then at some point, I don't know if it was that year or early 2020, I read a novel called Adventures in the Afterlife. And this book was written by a guy named William Buhlman. And William is a big out-of-body experiencer guy. He teaches people how to have out-of-body experiences. He
Okay.
was a lead instructor at the Monroe Institute. I don't know if you're familiar with William and his work, but he wrote this novel. He wrote this book as a novel, but it was so profound when I read it. And I reached out to him, and I found out later that even though it was written as a novel, it was all based on his actual experiences out of his body, going into the next, into the astral plane and into the higher dimensions. And got to the point where I was so enamored with this book that I optioned it from him to turn it into a feature film. So I started writing a screenplay based on the novel, and now we're into the pandemic hits, now we're into 2021. And as part of the research for that film, to write that screenplay, I started watching a lot of NDE videos, interviews with people on YouTube who had near-death experiences or other similar spiritually transformative experiences. And so I'm watching these interviews, I'm writing the script, I finish the script, and I can't get anybody to read it. Even though I worked in Hollywood for almost 20 years, it's now 15 years later, my connections are gone. I was never that well connected anyway. Couldn't get anybody to read the script. And I thought I have to focus on, I was killing myself trying to get this thing done. I had to put it aside. But what was happening was I was watching these interviews with these NDEers, and I started reaching out to some of them. And I started getting to know them, just like you and I are getting to know each other right now. And at a certain point, I just realized, I have to do a documentary about all this. But I
Was
wanted to do
was
it.
that a voice in your head as well, or not? Was that just a
I
thought?
want to be clear. I don't hear voices regularly. I'm not,
Sure.
I mean, my superpower, I think, is my felt sense of intuition. When I pay attention to my intuition, I know what I need to do next. The minute I start thinking about it, I can easily talk myself out of it, whatever that message was,
I recognize
right?
that, by the way. Yeah, talking yourself out of things.
So, yeah, so I really have to, and writing this book really helped me learn not to do that, not to talk myself out of stuff. But it was more of just an intuitive knowing. I mean, I can say there was a moment. And so basically, I don't know if you know Christian Sundberg. Christian is what they call a pre-birth experiencer, pre-birth memories. He remembers planning his incarnation, his life before he came in this time. Great guy, wonderful guy. And I had a Zoom set. I had seen an interview with him on YouTube. I just reached out to him kind of randomly. Turns out he was familiar with Adventures in the Afterlife, that book I was just talking about by William Buhlman. And we set up a call. And that morning, actually, before I was going to meet with him, I was making breakfast and I'm waiting for the toast to pop up, and the toast pops up out of the toaster. And that's when the idea hits me. You got to do a documentary about all this. So there was a moment, let's say. And that afternoon, when I spoke to Christian, I just said, "Hey, would you be interested? I'm thinking about doing a documentary." And he was like, "Sure." But the thing was, number one is I didn't want to do webcams, so that means I would have to be in a room with everybody. We'd have to be together in the same room. And then I also wanted to do. See, here's the thing. It was like I knew I had these questions that I want answered. So the film is called Every Soul Knows, and the website is everysoulknows.com. And the reason I'm mentioning that is if you go to the website, there is a page on the website that has these 35 questions. And these 35 questions serve as the backbone of the documentary. And they're questions like, what is the soul? Are there contracts or agreements between souls? Do we have soul groups or soul families? Is there such a thing as hell? What is, where is heaven? All these questions that people have about the afterlife. And what I wanted to, instead of people telling stories, I went through these same questions with all 30, with like 40 different people. So I went through these 35 questions with 40 different people. None of them knew who else was being interviewed for the film. None of them knew what anybody else's answers were to those questions. And yet, when you watch it, it's like they were finishing each other's sentences. These interviews took place over a 2-year period in different parts of the world, and yet it was like they were finishing each other's sentences. So I was like, wow, there's really something here.
I like that approach, by the way, with the static list of questions for everyone, because that is very like my mind in that that's a scientific approach almost, isn't it? You set the rules, you set the boundaries, and then whatever comes of it, great, and then you can investigate those results. So well played for you for doing it that way, because I really like that.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say this, part of the reason was, Paul, I was very conscious of I did not want to sensationalize the death experience, right? And a lot of the interviews that I was watching, and there's no right or wrong in this, okay? And I'm not saying my way is the right way or anything like that. But I noticed that, especially when I was new, watching these interviews, I would get so caught up in the car accident or the botched surgery or the illness that killed the person that I was kind of missing out on the bigger picture, which is what they experienced and what they learned from their experience. So I was very sensitive to that. I didn't want to sensationalize the death experience. Like I said, I had these questions, and it turns out a lot of people have these same questions. But then eventually what I realized was about a year and a half ago, I realized, there is value in telling the stories. So I went back to a few people, and then I found a bunch of new people, and I let them tell their first person account of their near death experience or other spiritually transformative experience. But I said, look, you only got 5 minutes to talk about the car accident or whatever it was. What I really want to know is what happened to you on the other side, and how has that changed your life? right? Because my thing is, how can we take what these people learned and apply that while we still think we're here in these bodies to make the world a better place? I mean, that's really the whole point of all of this, right? Otherwise, it's just a curiosity, sometimes a really grotesque curiosity, and I didn't want to do that. That wasn't what I wanted to do. So now I have this beautiful compilation of 62 people. About 40 of them I ask those questions to, and we go through those questions, and then we cut to a first person experience, their near death experience. And it's been a beautiful experience for me. And the best thing has been meeting these people, to be honest with you, spending time with them. My deal was I'm in New Jersey. I said, if you fly into Newark Airport, I'll pick you up at the airport. I'll bring you to the location, which is my living room, basically, my dining room. We'll do the interview. If we have time, I'll take you out for dinner. Otherwise, I'll take you back to the airport the same day, so you don't have to stay overnight if you don't want to. There was a couple of I did go. Are you familiar with the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANS?
Yes, yes.
So that's how I met Pamela, through IANS. I did go to their conference in 2023 in Washington, D.C., and I did about 15 interviews there. I showed a preview of the film in 2024 in Arizona at the IANS conference, and I did a few more interviews there. And then I did take a trip to California, and I did some interviews there. I don't know if you know Daryl Anka. He channels Bashar, Sarah Landon, and a couple other people. I did their interviews in L.A. But it was just so wonderful for me to spend time with these folks and get to know them as people. And I will say this, a lot of people say, well, how do you know what they're saying is true? And I have a couple of responses to that. The first thing is, having met these people, I trust my gut. I trust my instinct, right, on this. But I also say at the beginning of the documentary, I say, look, don't take anybody's word for anything, especially when it comes to the afterlife, because until we get there ourselves, none of us is really going to know anyway.
Yeah, it's not
But
verifiable
be
literally, is it?
open-minded,
Yeah.
right? Be open-minded, allow the information in. And then what I do is I actually stop the film 3 times to do a guided meditation. It's 2-minute guided meditation. And I say, look, you've heard what everybody else has to say. Now, what's your truth? What do you know to be true for you about this subject? And because I really want people to come to their own conclusions. I really want people to come to their own inner wisdom, their own highest truth about all of this. And because we're moving very quickly into what I call the age of discernment. We are being bombarded now. We talk about artificial intelligence and everything that's bombarding us that is designed to distract us, to confuse us, to, whatever. We really need to learn how to rely on our own inner wisdom to discern what's true, what's right, what's best for us.
I'm completely with you on
So,
that. By the way, you need to rely on yourself and not the propaganda or whatever else that comes in from the outside telling you how to think. Learn to think for yourself. It's that simple, isn't it?
yeah.
Or
And
trust
most of us
yourself.
don't want to do that. It's much easier to believe what the government's telling us, or, our church is telling us. But that age is over. We really have to learn how to find our inner wisdom. So now the first 40 people I went through these questions, and then I have these first person accounts, and spending time with these folks just showed me how genuine they are. A lot of the people, most of the people that I interviewed, I'll tell you right now, they're not getting rich off of this. And in fact, it's kind of the opposite. A lot of them are still subject to, being attacked on social media, trolls trolling them, people debunking them, people, attacking them. And 20 years later, a lot of them are still telling their story, right? And what is it? Why would you subject yourself to that? And back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, they were told they were crazy, they were put on medication. A couple of people I interviewed, their family has not talked to them in 20 years because what they say in their NDE happened goes against the family religion, right? So if these people are still out there telling their story, it's got to be because they really want to make a difference. They want to have a positive impact. And what could be a greater positive impact for the world than to understand that we are these eternal, divine, spiritual beings having a human experience, but we are loved, we are cherished, we are celebrated by our this divine spiritual team that we have. We have spirit guides, we have angels, we have ancestors that love us and care for us, and they're helping us, in our earthly experience. What could be better news than that?
Well, let's dive into some of this, but before we get there, I do have a word about what you said about it's not for the betterment sometimes of people. Like your example, you went from a high paid job to a less paid job, essentially, isn't it? You had to lose stuff to then build yourself back up again. And from what a lot of the people I speak to have a similar story in that they were a high end engineer, an aerospace engineer or whatever. They had enough. They changed their life to their passion, which is something you've done. They got less money, but they got more satisfaction. And that means more than the money. A lot of that seems to happen as well.
Yeah, and for me, that's one of the hallmarks of a genuine near-death experiencer, right? What people don't understand, and my mother is I love my mother, she loves me, but she doesn't believe all this stuff, and she said, well, how do you know it's not just a hallucination, right? And she'll read the New York Times, and the New York Times says, when the body dies, the brain releases endorphins, and so people have these hallucinations. And I said, Ma, I said, look, that may be true in some cases. All I can say is the people that I've met and the people whose stories I gravitate to, these people have a personal transformation as a result of this experience. All right. In many cases, they come back and they leave a very highly valued profession to do things like go work in hospice, or to do something that's humanitarian in nature, to do something that is about the upliftment of people instead of how they can line their pockets.
Correct. Of
And I don't
service, isn't
think
it?
being of service, right? And I don't think people do that if it's just a hallucination,
Completely
if they're
agree.
just
Yeah.
making something up. So I've seen this, I've witnessed this, and again, spending time with people firsthand, at least the people that I've been, I'm sure there are people out there on the internet who are just blowing smoke, and then yeah. So, but for me at least, it was just so instrumental to actually meet them and spend time with them, right, and get to know them. And so, and the thing about my film is about half the people in the film you might know, but the other half you've probably never seen before. And that was really intentional for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to give new people a chance to shine, to tell their story, right? But I also felt like they would bring a fresh approach to the topic, to the subject, and and a lot of them that they don't have books that they're selling. I mean, they have no reason to do this except that they want to share something that transformed their lives for the better. That's their motivation for
A
doing it.
very, very noble gesture, and I love that myself. I've spoken to a number of people actually from your film. Obviously, we've mentioned Pamela. I think I've spoken to Jacob, Cooper, Jeffrey Olsen, Peter Panagore, to name a few. Of the people included in your film, which story from a person do you think intrigued you the most?
People ask me all the time, "What's your favorite story?" I'm not gonna pick. I love all of them,
You
right? I
can't pick your
really do.
favourite
I mean,
child, can you? Yeah.
they've all transformed me. I mean, one of the things that happened in the middle of the film, Paul, was my brother died. My younger brother passed away,
Okay, sorry to hear.
and it was completely unexpected, and it was devastating to the point where I was going to give up on the film. I mean, I was so distraught. I was so upset, and I had so much grief and so much sadness. And let me say this to your audience. What I did that I think was very helpful for me was I allowed myself to have those feelings, right? I didn't try to talk myself out of the grief and the sadness by saying, well, life is eternal and we're spiritual beings and he's just a breath away. I let myself have that sadness, that grief. And I say this to anybody, don't try to talk yourself out of your human emotions because we're not here to be spiritual. We're already that. We came here for the human experience. right? That's part of the soul's reason that we're here is to have the human experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Part of the human experience is dealing with loss, dealing with grief, dealing with the challenges of the physical plane, illness, disability, financial setbacks, not to mention interpersonal relationship problems and all that. We came for those challenges. That's why we're here. So don't try to talk yourself out of those feelings. Allow yourself to have those feelings. And eventually, what happened, Paul, was it was this film that helped me move through his passing, through the grief. I went back and started watching some of the interviews I had done. I started doing some editing. And then the other thing was there's a number of mediums in the film. And he started coming through in some of these interviews. They would be like, there's somebody here. His name starts with a J. Does that ring a bell? I'm like, oh yeah, that's my brother John. Now he was a really tough New Yorker. All right. He was 3 years younger than me, but really tough. And he had moved to Florida. And he was living in the same complex as one of our sisters. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I had this desire to go see him, right? Again, my intuition. Called him up and said, John, I want to come down and spend a week with you guys. He's like, yeah, come on down. And we weren't estranged or anything, but we were very different people. And he was not into the woo-woo at all. He was not into the paranormal. He was not into spirituality, that best I could tell at least. And really tough, right? So I spent a week with him, and it was good. We still had our differences, but I'm glad I went, spent time with him, and at one point, I'm in the living room and I'm watching an NDE video on my tablet, and he kind of overheard it, and he's like, "Turn that shit off. You don't really believe that stuff, do you?" So the reason I'm laughing now is because the film is dedicated to him, and he's actually financing part of the film, and he's become part of this whole thing. Whenever I talk about the film now and I introduce the movie, I talk about him, and he's come through several of the mediums, and I know he's excited to be part of it now. And he admits that he was wrong about the afterlife. So I
That
can
is
almost laugh
quality.
about it. But I got to tell you, in May of 2023, I was so distraught. I never imagined I could feel so sad. When my dad passed, that was sad. But when my brother passed, and there was no indication, I mean, he had some health issues, but it wasn't like anything was imminent, and then he was just gone.
Hmm.
So it's all kind of come together. And I believe, number one, I believe that we have a soul plan, a life plan. Before we come into this lifetime, we plan out the major events, the major relationships, when we're going to be born, where we're going to be born, what family we're going to be born to. And we have this plan. And we cover all this in the film. And I also believe that we have these groups of souls that we incarnate with, right? So our family, our immediate family, close friends, but it could be as big as a sports team. You know, those people on that team at that particular time in that particular city, they probably had a plan to come together, to be together as part of that experience. So I believe my brother and I and other people in my family, we had these not only these plans, but we had these contracts. We have these agreements, right? So, we will find on the other side before we incarnate, we'll find another soul and decide, we're going to be mother and father, or to a child, or we're going to be spouse, or we're going to be siblings. We plan all that ahead of time. And I do believe that his and one of the key points of the soul plan are exit points. Nobody's death is accidental. Nobody's death is a coincidence. We may not be consciously aware of it, but at the soul level, we choose, and we have more than one. We have several exit points, potential exit points in our lifetime. What happened, because we need more than one, because what happens is we have free will, right? So we can miss the off ramp, if you will, or whatever. We make choices and decisions. So there is a plan, and there is, in a sense, destiny, but there's also, at the same time, free will. We certainly have free will when we make the plan, and we also have free will once we get here. And that's one of the reasons just to jump back to the book for a minute,
Hmm.
one of the reasons I think I had to injure myself was because I'm convinced that writing that book was part of my soul plan, and I wasn't doing it. I was doing everything else but working on that book. And I think the voice that I heard was one of my guides. And it was interesting. It wasn't now I can write my book. It was now you can write your book, right? So there was clearly a message there. So my point is, if we're not hitting, and again, the soul plan is kind of more like an outline or a blueprint. It's not a script. Like every choice that you make in your whole life is not scripted out. It's nothing like that. Although it does vary, but it's usually things that we want to accomplish in this lifetime. Maybe there's things that we want to overcome from previous lifetime. We certainly have karma in each lifetime to work out from prior lifetimes, and that's all part of the plan. I will say this, I believe karma is voluntarily chosen. I don't believe it's forced on us. I do believe when we're on the other side, we have a much different perspective on life, and we have a much different perspective on things. And so we want to, if we've done something wrong, if we've done something that's hurt another person, we want to atone for that. We want to make that right. We voluntarily choose that. And
That's like
I'll
the
stop there
universe
'cause-
forcing balance, isn't it? Because there seems to be balance in everything. So if you do X going that way, you want to do Y going that way to redress the balance, ultimately. I think that's part of the natural laws of the universe somehow.
yeah, I believe that's true. I don't know. I wouldn't use the word we're forced. Again, I think I really want to, one of the questions I ask in the film is, are human incarnations voluntarily chosen? And the resounding answer that the people I met with, at least, was yes. Nobody's here against their will. Now, a lot of people have a hard time with that. They're like, Are you kidding me? I chose this, right? I signed up for this, because the human ego wants to say, well, wait a second, somebody's doing this to me. I didn't choose this. I would
Yeah,
have
but
never
it's you.
chosen
That's the
this.
thing. It's yourself doing it to you. That's the thing.
Yeah. There's actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the Course in Miracles, but the Course in Miracles says the secret of salvation is but this. You were doing all of this to yourself. There is nobody else. So, but I think people, and when I speak publicly, and after I screen the film, I usually do Q&A with the audience afterwards, and I tell them, well, not only did you choose to be here, but you planned out your life, and by the way, you picked your parents, all right, whoever your parents are, you chose them to be your parents, and you chose your siblings, and you chose your spouse, and all of that, and it's like they're like, and by the way, you've already chosen when you're going to exit this lifetime. And so it's a lot for people to wrap their mind around, right? But I do think anything less than that, and it doesn't, for me at least, it stops making sense, And my whole point is we can't change life until we change our beliefs about the afterlife because it all kind of fits together, and so I say, you're not who you think you are. And the way most of us live our lives is as if we're a physical body, and when the body dies, that's the end of our life. Some people may believe there's heaven. My mother, she's convinced that there's nothing. Once you die, you're gone. That's it. You get one shot at this, and I know there's a lot of people that feel that way. And so if we change our thoughts about the afterlife, it will change how we live our lives, right? And so one of the principles that a lot of the near-death experiences talk about is this idea of oneness or unity, this idea that we're all connected. We're all part of the same greater whole, right? Well, if we're all connected, then what I do for you, I actually am doing for myself, right? And if I fail to do something for you, I'm failing to do that for myself because of this connection. And the example a lot of people use is, fingers on the same hand, we're all leaves on the same tree. There's this connection that we have. And what happens is we're fooled by these appearances. So I look at you and I say, well, you don't look like me, so you must be different than me. And that guy over there, he really doesn't look like me. And that girl, she doesn't even speak the same language as me. How can I be connected with any of them? And so when we have that idea of separation, that gives rise to competition. And competition is based in this whole idea of survival of the fittest. And survival of the fittest means, it's you or me, pal, and I ain't going down. And so, that becomes a justification for all kinds of cruelty, all kinds of insanity. And what if that's not true? What if that's not who we are? What
I
if that's
get
not
that,
how
but
it
here's
works?
the thing, right? Knowing that that's not how who we are and that's how not how things work. Unfortunately, in the 3D world, that's how physiology works. That's how, like you said, survival of the fittest. It does work here. That's there's got to be some measure of give and take in a way, hasn't there? Because this is the reality of where we live. If I don't put food in my mouth, they say there's limited food, and the guy next to me eats all of it, and I don't eat. I'm likely to die. So I've still got to adhere to the rules of the land, haven't I? Unfortunately.
Well, it depends. Depends on how you look at all this. All right. Now, number one, there's a lot of information coming out now in terms of what we'll call disclosure about the way certain things are run in the world. And a lot of the shortages, quote unquote shortages, may be artificially imposed to create that whole mentality that you just very well, you did very well at enunciating that whole mentality. But what if that's an artificial construct? What if there is enough, right? And what if there are ways to manifest more, to create more? And this idea that maybe cooperation rather than competition is the way that we all survive, right? I mean, there
I
are
am
different,
agree with you. We should do that. 100%. 100%.
well, there are different ways of looking at this. And a lot of it will be, we just got to trust because right now we're being told a lot of things that I think don't serve us and it creates division. I think one of the big things that's coming around right now is that it's not whether you're liberal or conservative or, Democrat or Republican or whatever that is. Okay. That's not the problem, those two ideologies. The problem is the people on top that are running everything who have a different agenda, right? And so if we can come together, all right, and if we can really establish governments and civilizations and societies that are promoting the common good, then I think we'll see less problems with things like food and resources and all of that. I believe in my heart that we have everything we need on this planet to sustain. We can even go more, bigger in terms of population. The problem is not that there's not enough. The problem is that there's manipulation of our consciousness first and then the actual supply of things. And I think a lot of that is going to be seen now in the coming years, months and years, that we're being played, the average person is being played like a fiddle and told things that are not true and manipulated and intentionally caused to fight with our neighbors, or at least people of another ethnicity, another race, another culture. They're the problem. They're the bad guys, and it's all a distraction.
I
All
agree
right.
on it. There obviously is managed control of resources and everything else, and definitely the division because division equals power for those ones above. Have you seen that TV show Pluribus?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it yet.
That you should watch it because it's exactly this whole scenario. When control goes, everyone gets everything, and everyone becomes the same. You should see it. It's very, very, very good program. Anyway, there's a quote right from the trailer of your film which really got me, which is by a chap called David. You can have a go at me if I pronounce this wrong. Is it David Suich or Suick?
Such.
Such. I got it completely wrong then. This is the quote. You've got to be an advanced soul to come down here. What's that about? Because that intrigued me the most. Because that says we're high level souls, all of us here on Earth.
Well, let's take a step back. So what happens is we choose to incarnate, and we
Hmm.
choose to incarnate because we want to experience who and what we really are. In heaven, in the higher realms, there is no contrast, right? Now, what's contrast? Contrast is good and evil, hot and cold, right? Love and fear. In the higher realms, it's only love, right? It's only goodness, it's only peace. And eventually, what happens is we stop experiencing that. Think about it this way. Would you know what hot is if there was no cold in the world? We need that contrast. So in order to know ourselves as who and what we really are, which by the way, guys, is love, we are it's not even how we feel, it's what we are. We are unconditional love, goodness, caring, compassion, kindness. That's who we really are. To know ourselves as light, we need to be able to experience darkness. To know ourselves as good, there must be evil in the world. Now, since there's no evil in heaven, we come down here, right? So that's the first thing to understand. We're here for a reason because we want to experience ourselves as love. And when there's only love, we can know that kind of intellectually, but we can't really experience ourselves as that. The analogy I use is being in heaven is kind of like reading the book on how to ride the bicycle. Being in the earth plane, in the 3D, in the physical plane, not only do we actually ride the bike, but then we fall off the bike. And not only do we fall off the bike, but we scrape our knees. And not only do we scrape our knees, but all our friends are laughing at us. Believe it or not, that's why we're here, is to have that moment when we're on the ground, our knees are scraped, we're in pain, and our friends are laughing at us. Because it's in that moment that we get to decide who and what we are. Now, there's a couple of ways you can go. I could feel shame and embarrassment, and all of a sudden, I'm not good enough. They're laughing at me. There's something wrong with me. I'm not lovable. Here we are coming from a realm where all we know is love, and now all of a sudden I have this choice point. Now, the other thing you have to remember, I'll finish this analogy in 1 second. The other thing you have to remember is this thing called the veil of forgetting. All right? And I'm going to get to David's quote in a second, too.
Thank you.
The veil of forgetting is basically we have a complete mind wipe when we come in. We completely forget who we are. We completely forget where we come from. We completely forget everything that's of any value, at least, in terms of dealing with this world. And we're kind of thrown in here. Now, the reason we do that is because without that, this experience would be meaningless. There would be no point in it. If we came in and we knew everything, the whole truth about who we are, about our karmic relationships with other people, our past lives, our future lives, the fact that we can't be killed, the body is killed, but we're not our body. If we walked around with that full knowledge, it would kind of make this whole thing kind of pointless, because it would almost be like going in for the final exam in university and knowing all the answers on the test. Right? The first time it would be fun, maybe. The second time it would be fun, but eventually it would make that whole experience meaningless. There would be no point in it.
I agree.
So
and also, just to add on to that, it would actually drive a lot of people to kill themselves, wouldn't it? Because they'd know this is not as good as where I want to be, which is in that all freedom and love. Why am I here suffering? They just, people just kill themselves.
Possibly. I mean, people. One of the people in the film, actually Christian Sundberg, the guy who started this whole ball rolling for me, he says the veil of forgetting helps us with homesickness. Right? One of the things that you hear from all the NDErs is they say, Jeff Olson says this in his interview, in his story. He says, some people call it the afterlife, some people call it heaven. He says, I was home. I had this overwhelming sense that I was home, and it felt so good to be home. A lot of them use that word, that exact word, home, right? So we would have this homesickness if we remembered. And a lot of the people that if they're a near-death experiencer, it means they didn't stay on the other side, they came back. And a lot of them say, I didn't want to come back. I had to come back because I hadn't finished my soul plan. There was other people that were, their plan was dependent on my plan. Anita Morjani, she had a lot of them have a choice. You can stay if you want, but if you go back, this is what's, in store for you. This is what you haven't finished. In her case, her husband's plan was dependent on her being here. So if she had stayed, it would have thrown his plan out, his soul plan. So she came back. She chose to come back. And she said, I didn't want to come back. And she came, I don't know if you know Anita's story, but she had stage 4 lymphoma. She was given 24 hours. She was actually in a coma. They thought she was going to die within 24 hours. The cancer was so bad you could see the
Oh, crikey.
tumors through her skin. She had all these lumps, and she weighed like 80 pounds. She was emaciated. She was gone, and the doctors told her family, say your goodbyes. She's not going to be here tomorrow. She goes into this coma, has a near-death experience. She sees her dad and her best friend who had died previously, and they tell her why she got sick, what happened, and they tell her if you go back, you're going to help a lot of people. But you have a choice. You don't have to go back. But they also said, and your husband Danny, his plan is kind of dependent on your plan. So she chose to come back and tell her story. And she eventually got connected with Wayne Dyer. Do you know Wayne?
I
Wayne
don't know.
Dyer, he was big in the 70s and 80s, self-help guy, wrote all these amazing books. He took her around the world and shared her story. Her story has touched millions of people. And this is somebody, she came back, and within 3 weeks, the cancer was gone, right? And the
Amazing.
doctors, she said the doctors were baffled. She said the doctors didn't know what to write in their medical journals.
I
They
like
had
that.
never seen a recovery like this, right? But she was told, if you go back, your body will heal and you will help many people. Now, she's another one. She's been attacked for years. She's been attacked by medical associations, by doctors saying this is not possible. And she has made all her medical records available for the public to review, right? And nobody has been able to debunk the reality of what happened to her, explain what happened to her. So, all right, so I just want to remember where I'm at. So, veil of forgetting. Oh, so you fall off the bike, right? And you're in pain and everybody's laughing at you. And now you have to make a decision. Who am I in this situation? Am I an idiot? Am I a doofus? Am I uncoordinated? Am I unlovable? Right? Or maybe you don't think you're unlovable, but maybe you think your friends are unlovable for laughing at you and you go attack them and beat them up. Right? That's a choice you make. Well, you can't do this to me. I'm going to get you back. Right? Or maybe you can make a choice to love yourself and love them. You could say, okay, I fell off my bike, but I'm going to console myself because it's not really anybody else's opinion of us that's the problem. See, even though my friends are laughing at me, I still have the choice to say, well, that's about them. I'm not going to take that personally and make that somehow proof that I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable. I made a mistake. I'm learning. I fell off the bike. It's hard when you're 9 years old to have that mental process. But the point is, so let's forget about 9 years old. Now you're 39 and you find out that your spouse is cheating on you with your best friend for the last 5 years. Now who am I? Right? Am I going to take that as there's something wrong with me? Am I going to withhold love for myself and feel sorry for myself and become a victim? Or am I maybe going to get really angry at them and am I going to attack them and beat them up? Or maybe I'm going to find a way to forgive everybody. Now, that might include I can forgive somebody and still request a divorce. I can forgive somebody and still not talk to my best friend ever again. But it's where I'm coming from when I do that that matters. And that's why the soul is here. The soul wants you to be able to choose love in every one of those situations for yourself and then for the other people. Now, the longest chapter in this book, okay, is on forgiveness. All right. And forgiveness has been a big part of my life lesson, my soul plan. I've had a lot of opportunities, let's say, to understand what forgiveness is. And I mentioned A Course in Miracles before. I've been studying A Course in Miracles for 35 years. And one of the main premises of Course in Miracles is forgiveness. But forgiveness is not what most people think it is. All right. And the longest part of the chapter in my book on forgiveness is a section on boundaries, healthy boundaries. Forgiveness does not mean that we let people walk all over us. Forgiveness does not mean that we give somebody a pass on their inappropriate behavior. It doesn't loving another person doesn't mean we stop loving ourselves and become a doormat, right? And so this is the challenge here in the earth plane where there is contrast, where there is what they call duality or polarities, right? There is love and there is fear, hatred, anger, right? There is goodness and there is evil. And so we have to choose in each moment, and that's why we're here. And we seek out those challenges for exactly that, the soul. Now, the human being is like, I want to kill my ex-spouse. I want to kill my best friend for what they did to me. I mean, that's a natural reaction. But the soul growth, the spiritual evolution, the spiritual advancement comes from making a higher choice in that moment. And
Testing
so that's
yourself
why we're
and
here.
choosing the right answer. Yeah, no, I like it. So ultimately, you could argue this whole place is a school. Then it's a school for us as pupils.
It's a school that we have chosen. And not only that, we've written the curriculum. And not only that, we give ourselves the lessons and the tests and the exams.
That is super. I like that because I've said this before to a number of people. Are we in a school or is this a prison planet? Now, the way you've described everything, and from what other people have said to me, it does seem like a learning experience. Therefore, you would say it is a school rather than a punishment being here. So it lends more credence to that. So back to the David quote. You've got to be an advanced soul to come
Yeah.
down here. Yeah, obviously we're
Okay.
in this scenario. We're love then. What else could you add to that?
Well, so here's the thing. So there are, let's just say there are different levels of awareness. All right. And we talk in the film, we talk about what's the difference between a young soul and an old soul.
Hmm.
Young soul and old soul is not about age. Okay. It's about experience. How many lifetimes have you embarked on? And what have you learned from those lifetimes? All right. And so it's my feeling, and I think this is what David was trying to say was, now I don't know if his statement is entirely true because I do believe that there are new souls that choose to come in. Let me say this too. What I've heard from everybody, all right, is that not a lot of souls avoid Earth because apparently Earth is a really tough place. It's one of the hardest learning grounds in the universe, apparently. It's so extreme. So there are souls who don't come here at all. They go to another planet or whatever, another dimension. They don't come here. So it's advanced in the sense that you really have to want to take on a challenge when you come here, right? Now there are some new souls who don't really know what they're getting into, but their guides kind of say, "Well, this would be really good for you. So just go. You'll enjoy it." You know? But I think it's more about in terms of advanced, it's more about experience, more lifetimes, more incarnations, a greater understanding of how things work, and a willingness, advanced in the sense of willingness to take on a great challenge. This realm is brutal, right? This
I
this
agree. Yeah, it is. There's
this can
suffering
be
all around.
really, really painful and really distressing. Again, I don't know if you're following the news, but there's all this information now coming out with the Epstein files about what's really going on at the highest levels of government and of society. There's some really dark shit, you know,
Proper. Yeah.
really, really horrible, horrible stuff. I mean, we're talking about satanic rituals and blood rituals and even cannibalism. I mean, it's crazy. It's really crazy. So you have to be really determined if you come down here to want to you kind of getting your money's worth. And there's a great opportunity to grow, to learn. Now, a lot of people say, well, if the soul is perfect, what would the soul have to learn? Right? So here's my answer. Take what you like and leave the rest. It's never a question of have to. It's always a question of choose to, right? Now, why would somebody choose? Well, it's why does somebody climb Mount Everest? Right? That's brutal from what I hear. It's really people die all the time trying to climb Mount Everest, yet they're lined up for miles trying to get up there. What is that about? It's kind of the same thing. And actually, David says this in another part of his interview. He says, we're doing the Mount Everest of physical incarnations by coming to Earth. It doesn't get any worse than this, you know? So we're choosing that. And why would we choose that? Well, I'm going to harken back to a book called Conversations with God, written by Neil Donald Walsh in 1995. It's actually a whole series. It's like 9 books. And I have been studying those books since 1995, so like 30 years. And in fact, right now, as we speak, this morning, I'm going through that material again. And basically, what he says in that book is, we come here because there's nothing else to do. This is like the only game in town. You got to remember, eternity, we are eternal beings. Eternity is a really long time. right? It's kind of like forever. So
It
at a
literally
certain
is
point,
forever. Yeah.
right? At a certain point, we're going to say, well, gee, I want to try something, different. Unconditional love is great. Betty Guadagno is in the film, and she says, when she was on the other side, she said, I experienced this amazing feeling of unconditional love. But then I thought about it. It's like, if that's all there is forever, at a certain point, you might want to experience something different. So that's why we seek out the opposite. That's the polarity, that's the duality. We seek out the darkness so we can actually know ourselves as light. So souls that come here want the adventure. We want the challenge because we know, and here's the other thing, guys, at the end of a given incarnation, when the soul returns to the other side, nothing that happened here, for the most part, there's no permanent loss, there's no permanent damage, there's no permanent injury. No matter how badly your body was treated here, when you go back to the other side, usually pretty quickly, you're made whole. And there's no lasting, we keep the experience, but we don't keep any deficiency or injury. In other words, the soul can never be diminished by an incarnation, and it can only be expanded. And the question that a lot of people hear in the life review is, how well did you love while you were there? And what expands the soul more than anything else is love, whether you call it forgiveness, kindness, compassion. People say, what's a good spiritual program? I say, forget about meditation, forget about prayer. Just be as kind as you can to as many people as you can, as for as long as you can. And your soul will grow, will expand spiritually.
I think that's a lovely sentiment. I'm going to go into the questions list now because I think it's a great list, by the way. I read it the other day, working out questions for this interview. I'm curious to know, how was it collated? Is it all your stuff, or did you speak with other people to come to this list?
So you're talking about the list of questions,
Yeah.
and again, it's on the website. There's a whole page with the
Yes.
questions. I have to say, I don't channel, I don't think, but I feel like this came through, like this was kind of channeled. And it was just like, you got to ask these questions, and here are the questions. It evolved. The list evolved over time, and there's a lot of overlap. What I'm doing right now, Paul, is I'm writing another book based on the film, because the feedback that I'm getting, like people love the movie, and people are having spiritual awakenings in the audience. I mean, it's really amazing. I can tell you one story later if we have time. But people are being transformed by this, but they're saying, it's really a lot to absorb in 2 hours, especially if you're not familiar with a lot of this stuff. It's overwhelming. So the idea came to me, intuition, write a book. And the book is like a companion to the film, so people can take in the information at their own pace. So what I've done now is I'm breaking it up into those questions become a section in the book. So
Nice.
each question has its own section. And you can take as much or as little time as you need to absorb that and think about that and all that. So the questions for me, they kind of evolve, but a lot of them are very, like I said, very common. People are, are we judged or punished in the afterlife for our mistakes? A lot of people were worried about that. There are a lot of religions that, are raking in the bucks from people who are
On
donating
fear,
because
yeah.
they're afraid that they're going to be judged and punished in the afterlife. And so I had these people, they went to the afterlife. Apparently, the only one who judges us on the other side is ourselves. There's no God. Even our guides and our angels, we're not judged by any of them. It's all love, it's all compassion, it's all forgiveness, it's all understanding, right? This whole idea that we're going to be punished for our mistakes is completely made up because it's a great way to control people, right?
Completely agree again. Of those questions, right, which one held most weight for you? Which one did you really want to know the answer to?
Well, again, I mean, um, well, I can't say there's one more than another, but I will give an example. So one of the
Sure.
questions is describe the life review. Now, not every, I've met a lot of people who never heard of a life review. I'm meeting people who never even heard of a near-death experience, but even if you've heard of a near-death experience, you may not be familiar with the life review, right? And I knew a little bit about the life review, but I didn't really know that much. And I just felt this is an important question, right? So for anybody who doesn't know, when we move on from this realm, we go back to heaven, to the afterlife. At a certain point, usually sooner rather than later, we have this thing called life review. And it's this idea that we relive most of the important moments in our life again for the purpose of, it's basically, the purpose is educational. It's a way to learn, to grow, to evolve, right? To understand. But the thing that struck me, which I didn't know, is not only do we experience the incident again from our perspective, but we almost become one with the other person and experience it from their perspective. And not only do we experience it, we feel the way they felt. So let's say we do a kindness for somebody, we do something nice for somebody, and they may not even have expressed it in the moment in an actual lifetime, uh, but in the life review, you get to see how that felt for them. And a lot of times it was the things that you never even thought of. Just smiling at a stranger, holding somebody's hand while they're telling you something important, patting a boy on the shoulder, good job, giving somebody a positive, I'm proud of you, which you don't really think much of at the time. You find out later in the life review that that moment changed that person's life. Now, it's also the flip side. Let's say you do an unkindness, you're cruel or mean or judgmental. Not only do you get to see it from your perspective, but now you get to feel the way they felt. Now, one of the key stories in the film is a guy named Bill Tortorella. Bill he had a near-death experience in 1994. He was at a trade show in Tucson, Arizona, and during his near-death experience, he had a life review. And what happened during the life review was he went back to a time when he had first gotten married. He was in his early 20s, and his wife and they had a 2-year-old son.
Okay.
And he decided he wanted out of the relationship. He wasn't happy in the relationship, and so he left. He left them. And at the time, he said, I wasn't really thinking about how they felt. I was just thinking about how I was feeling, and I felt like I had to get out of there. And he said, I wasn't conscious enough. I wasn't aware enough. And yes, I was kind of selfish, but I thought I was justified. This is the thing, guys. We always, always, always think that we're justified in doing what we do based on our own perspective. We have to be able to begin to see the other person's perspective to understand that, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't. So what happened in Bill's case was, he said, I had my life review, and when that scene came up, he said, everything stopped, and I felt the pain that I caused. He said, I became their pain. I felt how sad they were, and how hurt they were, and how they felt abandoned, and how afraid they were, right? How we're going to survive, and he said, I experienced all of that. And he said, I was so, in the life review, in heaven, he said, I was so sad. And I felt so horrible about what I had done. He said, I was begging God to forgive me for that. And then what happened was he had a moment of forgiveness. And his spirit guides were there with him, and they explained to him what was going on, and he had this transformation because he was genuinely sorry for what he had done. He was forgiven. And he said, all the weight just dropped off of me, and I had this experience now of this beautiful light that I was, this beam of light, this pure, loving energy. That's what I was. So now he comes back, and he's had this experience, and guess what? He knows now. He's like, I began to really be conscious of how I treat other people, of what I say, what I do, as it affects other people. And a couple of people in the film that also had life reviews, when I said, describe the life review, they said, don't wait until you're dead to make an amends to people that you've hurt. And I'm almost 30 years sober in 12-step programs, and part of the 12-step program is we make an amends to people that we've harmed. We take responsibility for what we've done. So I see the value in that. But until I really heard it, in the way these guys described the life review, it was like, I really think now, I'm very conscious of how I treat other people. right? Now, again, it doesn't mean that we have to become a doormat. It doesn't mean that we have to stop loving ourselves. That's why, again, the longest section and the longest chapter in this book is how to have healthy boundaries. Because with healthy boundaries, we take care of ourselves in the relationship, right? So we do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, and then we interact with the other person, so they can no longer harm us, right? Because other people, and I listen, when I was in my active addiction for years, I did things that harmed other people. And when I got to that point in my process, my 12-step work, I had to take responsibility for that. And I talk about this in that book as well. I had to take responsibility. I had to go to those people and I had to apologize. And not only did I have to apologize, I had to make reparations. If I did something, when I was a teenager, I worked at this shop and I stole some money from the cash register. 55 years later, I'm trying to find out who owned that shop so I could repay him, to make an amends, to set
Fair
things
play.
right, to take responsibility. So it's that kind of thing. And since I've been doing stuff like that, 12 step is great. My life is so different. I wouldn't be where I am now doing what I'm doing now if I was still acting out in my addiction and doing all the other crazy stuff.
Of course, I agree with you. The life review thing, right, is one thought that always comes to my mind, right? Say I'm having a conversation with somebody and I say something that has zero intentions of being harmful. My intention is just to be funny, as an example, and they take it wrong. Would that be up there because they felt pain, even though my intention was not how they took it?
So again, in my book, I talk about the difference between hurt and harm. Okay? Hurt is a very subjective, and it's there's overlap obviously, but hurt for me is a kind of a subjective thing, right? And so in your example, it really depends on where you're coming from, right? Your intention. If
Yes.
your intention was to make fun of somebody and belittle them, then you're definitely going to feel that on the other side. You're going to feel how they felt. If, on the other hand, you really were unconscious and you weren't intending to cause hurt to somebody, you'll probably see how they experienced it, but I don't know that you're going to feel that shame or that guilt or whatever that you might feel. In the book, I say, hurt is a subjective thing. Harm, the way I define harm is a objective diminishment of somebody else's life experience. So in the example I gave earlier, if I steal something from another person, I have diminished their life experience. I've taken away something that belongs to them. So that's harm. I've caused them harm. On the other hand, I could say something to somebody and they say I hurt their feelings, but that's a subjective thing. I mean, I don't have any control over whether or not what you think hurt your feelings. I may have been saying something that was true that you just can't deal with. Now,
Correct, yeah.
again, if I'm trying to hurt them, by intentionally, attacking them, there's still, I got to think about that. But here's the thing. Again, nobody is judged or punished on the other side for what you do. All right. Even people that do heinous things, again, like what we're hearing about people do to children and to other adults, that's really heinous. They're not sent to hell. They do get to experience the consequences of their actions. And I'm digging into this a little bit now, and there are different levels of the afterlife. And so, like William Buhlman's book, Adventures in the Afterlife, he talks a lot about the lower astral, right? And the lower astral is a lot like the physical plane. It's just one step removed. It's just like slightly out of phase with the physical plane. And a lot of dark shit happens there, right? And a lot of people who commit heinous crimes while they're in body, when they die, they kind of end up in that lower astral for a while, right? And they get to experience what was done to them, what they did to others by coming back to being done to them. So it's a pretty unpleasant kind of thing. Now, nobody is stuck there forever, and everybody is given a chance to kind of repent, if you will, to take responsibility for what they did and to ask for forgiveness like Bill did. But they're not put there as a means of punishment. It's just a natural consequence of actions like that. When you take actions like that, If you take another life, especially with malintent, there are consequences, not punishment. But as you said earlier, very eloquently, by the way, there's a balancing of energy. There's a balancing. So if you take a life, guess what? You're going to experience what it's like to have your life taken in some way or form. And so there has to be that balancing.
That's it. So even if you are a murderer in this life and escape punishment in this life, it's not necessarily a punishment, but like you said, there will be consequences of your actions at some point.
You will find out exactly how you made that other person feel.
Yeah. So don't
You're going
do
to
it.
get it, and it may happen more than once. It may be repeated till you get
God.
it.
Having heard the answers from your interviews to the questions list, is there an aggregated answer that still doesn't work or make sense for you? Or does everything make sense now?
Well, again, it's like I want people to find their own answers. So listen to what everybody has to say, listen to their experiences, but we each have to go within. I have to decide what's true for me. Again, 12-step programs, they say take what you like and leave the rest. I mean, but that's the problem. It's like I have to be responsible for, I can't blame, my teachers or my church or my government for the choices that I'm making. I have to take responsibility for that. So I have to decide what's true for me, and then I have to live with that. Now, it's not to say that we can't change our truth, right? I mean, that's what evolution is actually, growing as a spiritually or even as a person. We change our beliefs, we change our truth, so it becomes hopefully more and more of a positive impact on the world. And so I'm not going to say every question, every answer to every question as presented in the film is gospel truth for everybody. Your truth may be different, and I honor that. I interviewed 62 people because I felt if it was only 5 people or 10 people or whatever, there would still be there might be more ambiguity. But when you hear the same thing from that many people, and they're literally, again, Paul, I don't think you've actually seen the film yet. They're literally finishing each other's sentences. And again, they had no idea who else was interviewed. They had no idea what else anybody else had said. And they were separated by months, if not years, between the answers. And yet they're finishing each other's sentences. For me, and they're all different ethnicities. They're all different religious backgrounds. They're all different genders. It's like, it's a really wide selection of people. I felt that was important to get as many different viewpoints as possible, and I was amazed at how similar the answers were.
Awesome. No, I agree. I have watched a few of the interviews that are on the website, and I didn't watch all 60 of them, but I did watch a few, specifically Pamela I wanted to start with, because I've obviously talked to her a few times. But that's cool that everything is aggregated, and it goes towards an overall conclusion. Whether you believe in that conclusion is up to you. I get that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Once the documentary was completed, what shifted in you? How did you change? What did you learn? And what kind of things stuck out to you the most from that learning?
So the very last question, I think it's the last question that I asked was, what does our soul want us to know? And, this is like getting guidance from our higher self. I mean, it's the part of us that is eternal, the part of us that sees the big picture, the part of us that knows all the lifetimes, that knows all the karma, that knows, and almost everybody said, your soul wants you to know that you are loved. No matter what you think you've done, no matter how unworthy you feel, no matter how you screwed up, you are loved. You are loved. You are forgiven. You are embraced. You are cherished. You're important. And these are very important messages, because a lot of us, again, I'll go back to my story. When I made the transition from lawyer to filmmaker and photographer, what caused me so much grief and misery was this idea that I was unworthy. I was not good enough to do that. I was not, and people were going to criticize me, and I was going to feel shamed and bad. And the original title of this book was, Who Do You Think You Are? And, people say that sometimes. It's meant as an insult. It's like, who do you think you are? What right do you have to partake in a profession or a career that you enjoy, that's expressive, that's creative? Who do you think you are to do that? So it's that shaming voice and that feeling of unworthiness and feeling not good enough, right? That's all, for me at least, it's all a response to, I mean, it's basically the conclusion of a 5-year-old who came to certain conclusions about himself based on what was happening when he didn't really understand what was happening, and then we create a life around that. Like I had these subconscious beliefs that I was not good enough, that I was unlovable, that I was unworthy. And those thoughts and beliefs were running my life, and I wasn't even aware that that was the program that was running my life. Because when you get those messages as a kid, they're so painful that they have to be repressed. So now they're no longer in our conscious memory. But guess what? Those programs are now running. And so all my failed relationships, all the jobs that didn't work out, all the, and I had to use drugs and alcohol to medicate, to anesthetize myself from those horrible feelings of how bad I was, how unworthy I was. For me, I believe that's the basis of almost all addictions, is that feeling of unworthiness, unlovable, all of that. And here I have all these people in the film saying, you are loved. Not only are you loved, that's what you are. We are love. We are the energy of love. It's not just the feeling. That's what we're made of. That's that people talk about the matrix, right? They talk about the ley lines and the energies and the grid. The sunlight, my understanding is photons coming from the sun are transmutation of love in the fifth dimension, the spiritual energy of love transmuted into an energy that can be assimilated in the 3D, in the third dimension. It comes out as light. That's why we say, you are light, you are love. I went to the light. So my point is, we have no idea who we are. We have no idea what's going on here. And we have all these misconceptions that are making life really difficult and really unpleasant. The reason it's so hard on the earth plane is not because the earth plane is inherently evil. It's because the depth of forgetting the truth of who and what we are is so complete, right? In some of the other, my understanding, and again, very loosely understand this, but in other dimensions, there is more, we retain more memory of who and what we are. We retain more memory of the afterlife and of the higher realms. Here, it's like you tell people, you are an eternal soul and you have lived forever and you've had many incarnations. They look at you like you're nuts. Now, more and
Yeah.
more is changing, and that's part of the spiritual awakening that's happening on this planet. We're here. You, Paul, you're one of the people that's here to help other people remember and to help everybody wake up. That's why there's such a surge. If you look on YouTube, there are so many channels now devoted to near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative type experiences, and why so many people are watching. The audience is just growing exponentially because this is the time. We chose to be here to be part of this awakening, this ascension from the 3D to the 5D, from a low density, dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, kill or be killed mentality to the fifth dimension, which is all about love, light, oneness, unity, compassion, higher. There's no illness, there's no sickness. We come and go as we please. We don't have to wait for the body to die to have an out of body experience, all of that. It's all changing and we're all part of it,
I
I
love
believe.
that sentiment, that we are part of it. I do genuinely love that. Here's one final question before we move into the Koit zone, which is this. If we've got the veil of forgetting, does it seem to you that messages from like spirit world and stuff that come in under the veil or through the veil, so to speak, is that some measure of cheat in the game? If we're playing on hard level, is there a cheat coming through and saying, no, oh, here's some other information for you?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call it cheat. I would call it guidance. I would call it assistance. Without that, we'd be screwed, quite honestly. I mean, without the higher, say what you will. I mean, without the veil is so complete that I think without the help, we would all be doomed. I mean, you could talk about, look, there are other, there have been other civilizations in the solar system. I mean, I don't, maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, but the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was once a planet, and they blew themselves up, right? I mean, they were so depraved that they just exploded, and some of them went to Mars, and then they continued their battle on Mars, and that's why Mars has no atmosphere, and then some of them came to Atlantis, and that's why Atlantis went off the rails, you know. So we need all the help we can get, right? So it's not so much, and again, I mentioned Conversations with God. Highly recommend that book series to anybody. And right at the beginning, he says, it's not to whom God speaks, but who listens. So the idea is God is speaking to us all the time through our guides, through our angels, through, our ancestors. Most of us are not listening, right? That's the problem. So part of the, you know, we're so distracted by the 3D, first of all. Social media, everybody's staring at their phone 24/7. You got to get quiet, I think. Either that or you got to injure yourself, like I did, where everything just stops for an instant to get the messages that are being offered to us. This is not about, it's not like we're thrown to the wolves and say, deal with it, kid. It's like we're part of a team, and when we come in to heal certain trauma, we're healing for our lineage. Like I have stuff on my dad's side of the family, and I'm very clear that I'm here to stop that pattern. The alcohol and all of that, I have come to stop that. And I voluntarily chose that. But to come in without any help, that would be cruel, So we have all the help we need. A couple of people in the film, it's so funny. They said, your guardian angels, your guides and your angels feel really underemployed. They're not getting to do anything for you because you're not asking for help or you're not believing that you have help available. Most of us feel so unworthy that we don't think anybody would want to help us. Right? It's like we feel so bad about ourselves because we've been told we're sinners and we're this and we're that and we're unlovable and we're horrible. We don't even think we're worth being helped. And yet we have these teams, these armies of angels just waiting to help us. But you got to ask and you got to believe. And they will never do for you what you can do for yourself. And they will never do anything that transcends your free will. See, we always have free will, but they will help to the extent. I have several stories of people who were in a car accident, and at the last moment, the oncoming car was coming to hit them, and their car was moved by a few feet, and there was no collision. How do you explain that?
I don't know, but I
Right?
do love those stories. Yes.
Right? So there's something at work here. Lelania Fulton is in the film, my film. She had a near-death experience when she was 7 years old. She was drowning in a local lake. She jumped in the deep end and she didn't realize it was so deep and she was sunk to the bottom and she was dying. And she had everything they talk about, the near-death experience. I had a moment of clarity. Everything was peaceful. It was beautiful. I was watching the sunlight come through the water and hit the sand on the bottom of this lake, and it was this gorgeous thing. And she said, and I heard in my head, she said, I heard a voice, and the voice said, "What would you like to do?" She knew she had a choice. She could either continue on to the afterlife or come back. And what happened was, in that moment, she said, I realized that my mother, it would kill her. If my mother lost her daughter, it would just kill her. So she said, I realized I had to come back. At that moment, she said, an adult started coming towards her. All right. And the adult came to her and literally scooped her up and picked her up out of the water. Now, her mother was on the shore and was looking for her, was like yelling for her and looking for her, and she couldn't see her. And then she saw this woman pull her out of the water. Now, the woman was an older woman and she had like a 1940 style bathing suit. She was completely out of place there, didn't fit in at all, but pulled her out of the water. And she says, Lelania says, I couldn't see the woman's face. I could feel her against my chest. I could feel myself against her chest, but I couldn't see her face. And she said, then the woman handed me to my mother, and my mother ran with me back to the shore, put me on the blanket, and I was coughing up all this water and all of that. And she said, by the way, the feeling of peace and bliss was gone, and now I'm in pain, and I'm, spitting up water. And she said, after about 10 or 15 minutes, I calmed down, and my mother wanted to find the woman to thank her for saving my life. And she didn't see her anywhere, so she started asking other people. And she asked the lifeguard, and the lifeguard was 10 feet away, didn't see anything. And the people around her didn't see anything. Nobody knew anything about this woman. And she said, we never found out who that woman was until 20 years later, when Lelania was in a car accident on the Autobahn, doing 90 miles an hour on the Autobahn, and with no seatbelt, got into a collision with another car. The other car, bodies were everywhere. Lelania had a little scrape on her nose. That was it. And she said, in that moment, I realized that was a guardian angel. That was an angel who came and pulled me out of the water and saved my life. That's the kind of help that we have. That's the kind of help that's available. I have another woman, very similar story. I'm not going to tell it now, but it's on the website. Let me say this real quick. So anybody who's interested, go to the website, everysoulknows.com. What I did is everybody's full interview is available for free, no subscriptions. I even cut out the ads, the YouTube ads. There's no ads. So you can watch the entire interview on the website or on the YouTube channel. The film YouTube channel is at Every Soul Knows. And you can watch all their stories, hear everybody's story for free, and you can see for yourself. And I did that for two reasons. Number one is I wanted to create a resource for the audience. So especially if you're new to the whole subject, you can go someplace after you watch the film to fill in the gaps and find out all the information that you might want. So it's a kind of a reference library for people. But I also wanted to honor the people who honored me by being part of the film, and make sure that their whole story, even though the film is now like 4 hours long, 4.5 hours, most people only get a few minutes on camera. So I wanted to make their full story, because most of the interviews are like 30 to 60 minutes. So go to the website. You can watch everybody's full story. You'll see Lelania's story. There's a woman named Sylvia Rossi. Sylvia is a psychic medium here in New Jersey. She had an experience where when she was born, I can't get into the whole story now, but there was a guardian angel that came and helped her survive. She was not supposed to survive. So my point is, we have all kinds of help available to us, but we have to believe and we have to ask, and we have to understand they're not going to fix our lives for us, but they will help us. They will give us guidance.
I do love that again. And I've spoken to a number of NDEers, other people that you haven't spoken to, with similar stories, by the way, of being underwater, and they're like, a hand comes in and grabs them and things like that, So yes, I get that, and they're fascinating things. And based on what you said about your website, by the way, all that stuff is linked in the description to this video and to everywhere else that this will be. Before we wrap up, Peter, it would be remiss of us if we didn't take a cheeky little visit to the Koit Zone. Koit Zone! So in the Koit Zone, I just ask you questions about you. So let's go with an easy one to start with. What's your favourite movie, if you have one?
I hate to say it this way, but my favorite movie is my movie, my documentary.
Get in, well played.
I mean, I really love it. I love it, and I know I have 100 hours of interviews, and I know almost every word of every interview, and I still get choked up sometimes, and I feel like this is my sole purpose. This is why I'm here. Now, I have a whole list of movies that I want to make. I have a whole production company. It's called Mindful Entertainment. Mindfulentertainment.us is the website. You can see the other film projects I have. I still want to make Williams' book into a film. In terms of the afterlife, What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, 1998, great film.
Yes.
I will say this, having worked in Hollywood for 20 years, I very creative people, really creative, talented people, but I find that there's room for more empowering messages, and there's room for more inspiring and uplifting, instead of kind of reinforcing a lot of the I can't see a place for violence anywhere in our media, especially with children. I mean, I feel like I have a responsibility as a filmmaker and just as an adult to not foster violence at all in young people's minds, especially. And we still have a lot of that in films and stuff. So I'm just going to say my film for now.
Well played to you. Do you have a piece of clothing that you really should throw away, but you carry on wearing it anyway?
No, I've gotten really good at cleaning out closets and stuff like that. So I try to be conscious of that. I donate. There's a donation bin close to where I go for my groceries, and so I'm always bringing stuff there. Um, so I don't think there's anything that I should. I mean, there's stuff I enjoy that I like to wear, but stuff that I should get rid of now.
Good on you. You're a master of letting go. I like that. Um, what annoys you the most?
What annoys me the most?
And bear in mind,
You
like you
know,
said earlier, this is a human experience, so it could be anything, like
you
as
know,
simple as an
the
insect pissing you off, you know?
I have well, yeah, I mean, insects. So I love house plants. I have all these great house plants, and somehow I got soil gnats. I don't know if you know
Oh, yeah,
soil
yeah, yeah.
gnats. They're like fruit flies.
Jumpy things, yeah.
Well, but they fly, and they just all of a sudden I had this infestation. So I've been working on that for almost a month now. It looks like I finally may have conquered them. So yeah, I mean that's annoying, and what they do is these gnats they fly in your face. So I'm working on the computer in another room, and all of a sudden they're like in my eyes and in my face. It's like really that's annoying. I have issues with neighbors, loud music and stuff like that. But it's been, I have to for me, and maybe I'm sounding like a broken record, but the more I take responsibility for my feelings, the more empowered I am. And the more empowered I am, the less I find myself in annoying situations, right? So yesterday was my sister's birthday. She's got 3 kids. She's a single mom. I took everybody out for dinner, to Cheesecake Factory, which is a chain.
Nice.
I don't know if you have them in the UK, but
I've been
chain,
to a few in like Las Vegas and stuff. It is beautiful.
right? Yeah, it's fun. And they screwed up the order, and my sister was on. I'm like, in the scheme of things, it's not that important, and so in the past, I would have been really, and want to see the manager and all, and I can't do that anymore, and she's a kid. The waitress was like 19. She's a kid, and it's like, so I try, there's a lot to be annoyed about in life, but we have a choice in every moment, and the more we make the higher choice, the easier. And what's happening, my experience, Paul, take it for what it's worth, the less annoyed I am at life, the less annoying situations I have in my life. You
Yes.
got to understand the law of resonance, the law of attraction. We attract whatever we're focused on. So if I'm focused all the time on how other people are annoying me, guess what? Guess what? It's going to show up in my life. And the less I do that, I got to tell you, my life 10 years ago, 5 years ago, my life was filled with annoying people and annoying situations. And most of that is gone now because I don't
I'm with
focus
you,
on
by
that. I
the
don't give
way.
that my attention. I don't give that my energy, you know?
No, I do know, and I definitely know about the soil gnats because we get them every year when we do our seedlings. They're always coming in the compost, so but something we deal with. To you, what is your favourite weather?
It's freezing cold here. I mean, it's as cold as it's ever been here in the New York. I live close to New York City, northern New Jersey, and it has been freezing here, and I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like the really hot weather. I think spring is lovely, when the trees are in bloom, and the fall. We had a beautiful fall last year. All the trees. So I'm kind of, even though I'm not far from New York City, I'm kind of in the country a little bit. So we have beautiful forests and trees and all of that. And so I would say fall is probably before it gets too cold, when there's still foliage and all that. I do a lot of photography in the fall too.
Lush. And by the way, I'm going to interject this here about your photography. I looked at your photos, and By Jove, they are ace. Well played to you.
Thank
Especially
you.
your favourite folder where like you've got lightning stuff hitting buildings and things. I think they're bloody awesome. I was like wowed when I saw that, so well played to you. I can see
Let
why
me
you've
pitch
won the
that just
awards.
yeah, just so real quick. So my photography website is peteralessandriaphotography.com. So I don't know if I sent you that link, but if it's
I
not in
found
there,
it, yeah.
people can just Google my name. It should show up, and I have all my photography there. The website for my book is bebiggertoday.com, or again, just Google my name. I did a TEDx talk a few years ago, so that usually comes up too. So you'll find me. It's not just through the film. I have like three different websites. So photography, the book, films, other stuff too. But start with my
Again,
name.
that's all cool. All linked below, by the way. What is the best thing you've ever found?
Found
Yeah,
my love for myself,
a nice
my
answer.
innocence. Found that I'm not that guilty sinner that I was told I was when I was growing up. And neither is anybody else. I can't imagine finding anything better than the truth of who and what we are.
A great answer. What job is on your to-do list in your house that you haven't gotten round to doing yet?
I got a vacuum. I live alone. I'm a bachelor, so I kind of let in the bathroom. Got to clean the bathroom too.
Yeah, that's a bane of male's existence, I think. I know that sounds sexist, but it is. What is the best flavour?
So there's this Friendly's ice cream that I get that's like they call it forbidden chocolate, and it has dark chocolate and I guess milk chocolate. I love that. They have a coconut too, coconut ice cream. I like that too.
But chocolate seems to be then the answer for you. Your favourite flavour is
Let me tell
chocolate.
you something. I eat raw kale 3 nights a week, and I love kale. I mean, I'm vegetarian, and so I love my salad. 3 nights a week, I make a salad that's this. I swear, it's the biggest bowl you've ever seen, and it's usually topped off with kale and all kinds of stuff. I have like 15 different ingredients. I love that. I love a good piece of fruit. You know, uh, I'm simple in that way, I guess.
But I am going to push you, Peter. Is it going to be the fruit, the kale, or the chocolate? Which is winning as the best flavour?
Well, I don't have to limit myself. I can have all three in one night.
Yeah, you can do. But see, like for me, I'd have to put one top. I couldn't have. No, one would be the best. But there we go. Side note.
There you
Um,
go.
Another favourite. I don't know why I wrote loads of favourite questions with you, but do you have a favourite animal?
Well, I have a goldfish, and it started out as it was a gift to my nephew, and then they got a cat, so I got the fish back, and now the fish has been with me. Fish had a near-death experience, so and I raised him from the dead. So there's some miracles happening with this goldfish. He's 9 years old now, and I recently befriended a squirrel. I have a squirrel now that shows up at my door,
Oh, I love that.
looking for food, and he sits right outside the door now. It's really a wild squirrel, and yet he's. My sisters have cats. I like cats. I think dolphins are really cool. A story in the film. I don't know if you know Carlos Vivas.
I don't
Carlos
know.
was actually rescued by a dolphin. He was
Oh
drowning,
wow.
and he had an NDE, and it was a dolphin that saved him.
Oh, I love that. Let's see if
Dolphins,
I can get hold
apparently,
of him.
dolphins are higher. Dolphins and whales are extra dimensional or extraterrestrial beings that have come to help us with our ascension.
Oh, I like the idea of
Apparently they're
that.
they're much higher frequency than we are.
Awesome. Well, that's something I'm going to look forward to getting involved with then. The last question in the Koit zone, and it's kind of apt in this way because of what you're studying or have studied. Are you afraid of death yourself?
So this question comes up a lot, Paul, and I'll say this. I'm not afraid of being dead. It's the dying part that I still have a little hesitancy about, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you hear some of the horrendous ways people die, but one thing that I have heard pretty consistently is that most of the time you are spared the trauma of like the car accident. You leave your body before the impact, and time time is not what we think it is. right? And so on the other side, most everybody says, when they have if it's particularly traumatic near death, it's like time slows down. Everything slows way down, right? And so, and my understanding is that most of the time you're removed from, again, whatever the accident. My understanding is people like from 9/11, there were people jumping out of the towers because it was burning, right? And I mean, that was a very impactful day in my life, having grown up in New York and grown up with those buildings and all that. Uh, but my understanding is that most of those souls were freed before they hit the ground, and it's a really glorious freedom. Leaving the body is apparently the best thing that we can ever do. Everybody describes the sense of freedom and lightness. They say, "Oh, it's so dense here and it's so constricted and everything is so heavy." They say the minute you leave the body, it's like you're free and it's glorious and you have this sense of unlimitedness, and this sense of peace. A lot of people, I don't know if you've heard this. I know Jeff said this, Jeff Olson said this in his story. A lot of people, when they die and they leave their body and they're looking back on the scene, they don't even recognize that body as being them. They're
Yes.
looking and they're saying, "Oh, that poor guy, he's dead. He just was in a car accident. I wonder what happened to him." And then they kind of get closer and they realize all of a sudden, "Oh, that was me." So there is this dissociation that happens pretty quickly when we die. This is my whole point. So maybe the dying part is not as scary as we think it is. Once we're on the other side, though, it's as what I've heard, it's all light, it's all love. You see people that passed, your dead relatives and loved ones come to greet you. It's like this amazing homecoming, and it sounds amazing, sounds wonderful.
It certainly does, and I'm with you, by the way. I don't mind the dying. I'm kind of looking forward to it in a way, but I also don't want the pain of whatever is going to take me out. If there's going to be an axe or anything, I don't want any of that malarkey. But hey,
Listen, again, the exit points are part of the soul plan. So you've already chosen when you're going to leave, and we've all chosen our exit points, right? And so there's no such thing as accidents. Nobody dies against their will. Even again, the horrific stuff that we hear, that's happening to people, maybe it's a war, two armies are fighting each other. They planned that. They had that, again, not at the human level, not at the human conscious level, at the higher level, because it serves a greater purpose, right? And there are some people, my understanding is there are a lot of souls, they don't want to die in a hospital bed they don't want to linger for 6 months or 6 years in a hospital bed. They want to just go, and the more dramatic, the better. So they pick an exit because again, it's almost like, I want to be careful how I say this. So it's certainly not fun for the people who are left behind, right? Again, when my brother died, man, I thought it was over. I was so distraught. It was so hurt so much. So I get that. And apparently it's almost fun on the other side when you get back there to the point where it's like, it's joy. It's all joyous, and it's like, so we have this huge disconnect between what we feel in the human experience and what we experience as a soul, right? So just kind of be open to that, and trust it's all part of a bigger plan.
agreed. That is the end of the Koit zone, so thank you for going through that with me. I know there are random questions sometimes. That brings us to our very final question together, which is there any project that you're currently working on? What's next for Peter?
So as I said earlier, right now I'm working on the book version of the film. So the book is going to be the same title, and I have this feeling I got to get it done sooner rather than later. I submitted the film to a bunch of festivals, so I'm waiting to hear back from the film festivals. I submitted to the Cannes Film Festival in Cannes in
Nice.
France, which is a big international festival. I'm hoping that will happen in May. So I'm hoping that I have some festival, some way to promote it. And I want to have the book ready. So when the film is launched, the book will be ready. So I'm working on that. And then if you go to mindfulentertainment.us, you can see the other projects I have.
Awesome. Peter, thank you ever so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you ever so much for coming on. To all the people watching and listening, again, check out the links in the description. Go and look at Peter's work. It's fascinating stuff. Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.